Salutations, everyone. I'm Elias, and welcome to the show that no one saw. In today's episode, I'd like to talk to you all about My Little Pony. My Little Pony is a toy franchise that started in 1981, originally called My Pretty Ponies. It's made its way through 5 generations, 5 TV series, and a handful of theatrical and direct-to-video films. I've consumed a good portion of every generation, but like a lot of fans, my bread and butter was Lauren Faust's My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. Faust is a master showrunner and creative developer, and she was able to breathe a new life into the franchise, accompanied by new mythos, epic battles, and iconic characters. When Generation 4 came to an end, Hasbro had some big horseshoes to fill. My Little Pony: A New Generation, otherwise known as Generation 5, was met with some pretty intense scrutiny from fans of Friendship is Magic. Personally, I thought it was enjoyable. I'll watch just about anything where Kimiko Glenn voices a talking horse, but I found that I was able to pinpoint a decision that I think really held the film back. Generation 5 takes place in the same universe as Generation 4, operating under the same mythos and world building, with the main characters from Generation 4 acting as important plot points. Now, anything that followed Friendship is Magic was going to be under a microscope, but I don't think that making G5 a sequel really helped at all. If anything, it felt like it was comparing itself to the previous generation just as much as the fans were. This all got me thinking, what would I do if I were given the opportunity to craft the next generation of My Little Pony? And that is exactly what this long-winded intro has been leading up to. With this project, I wanted to create a show that was not only entirely separate from Generation 4 lore-wise, but felt like a completely different show aesthetically, while still retaining the franchise's core theme of friendship. I also knew I wanted to take characters from previous generations that weren't heavily featured in Generation 4. I had briefly debated starting from scratch with characters like Generation 5 did, but since the rest of the project was so antithetical to a profitable toy line, I figured the least I could do was let imaginary Hasbro use the patents that they already had. I like 6 as a number for the main cast. There's a lot of good ways to split up 6 for A and B plots. I knew I wanted to include Wisteria and Minty since they were my favorites growing up and never made it into Generation 4, and I went through all my old toys to put together a lineup of candidates for the rest of the cast. You can see me experiment with Seashell and Bluebell briefly, but eventually I went with the lineup you'll see today. As far as concept, I was actually inspired by an episode of Bob's Burgers where Tina's Horse Show is rebooted from a large-scale action fantasy show to a slice-of-life show where they own a basket shop. This brought to mind reboots like Teen Titans Go and the Looney Tunes show, which found success in bringing larger-than-life characters to a mundane setting. I thought that was the perfect way to separate this show from G4, so I leaned into it. The ponies of Ponyville can all send their dreams to the Dream Tree, where our main cast works to help them fulfill it. Sparkleworks is our main character. The Dream Tree is a family business which she inherited after her parent retired. She's bubbly, overbearingly optimistic, and very passionate about her work at the Dream Tree, even if she's not the best at it. I imagine she's one of the ponies that goes regularly out into Ponyville for, field missions. Her story would be about the pressure of fulfilling expectations and how to get back up even when you fail. To help convey all this visually, I gave her a very rounded design with a sharp focus around her face thanks to her blaze. Since she's a bit of an unpredictable character, I gave her an asymmetrical mane, which I balanced out with a light marking on her opposite leg. I wasn't sure about including hooves in these designs, but since I'm leaning more into the realistic faces of generations 1 through 3, I figured it would be another good differentiator between this generation and Generation 4. I optioned a few different cutie marks and eventually landed on a shooting star to indicate Sparkleworks' motivated personality and what I imagine is a penchant for magicking up light shows. Next is our foil character, Crystal Lake. One thing I am keeping from G4 is the idea of cutie marks being something you get when you realize your life's purpose, and Crystal Lake doesn't have one. I imagine she starts out as a minor recurring antagonist, a snarky pony who refuses to help out the main cast, someone who thinks the Dream Tree is useless and that we should only help ourselves. I imagine she remains antagonistic for most of the first season, but sort of softens around Sparkleworks over time, until she eventually comes to the Dream Tree herself and asks them to make her happy. Through trial and error, they realize that the thing that truly makes her happy is helping others, and she joins the Dream Tree's staff. There will be growing pains over the course of the series, but what's important is that she actually wants to change and actually enjoys helping out. As a character, she'd teach kids in the audience about introspection and personal change, and the fulfillment you get from helping others. Since this is exactly the kind of character I would have loved as a child, I gave her these markings that are reminiscent of human vitiligo. Obviously, vitiligo presents differently in most other species, but I'm going to go ahead and say that it's a show about magic talking ponies, and Crystal Lake has vitiligo. This also functions to give her something around the flanks so she doesn't feel empty or plain compared to the other ponies. Next up is Wisteria, who was my personal favorite pony growing up. Wisteria is sort of a Southern Belle character. She's a high-strung perfectionist who puts maybe too much weight into politeness and manners, but always treats people as well as she possibly can. She makes sure the Dream Tree's clients feel welcomed and at ease. I also imagine she's a big gardener. Gardening is a domain where you have a lot of control and you get to make something beautiful. I think Wisteria would enjoy such a hobby, even if it means she gets her hooves dirty. Her story would be about learning to embrace imperfections. I think she could also teach some important lessons about being polite and hospitable, but also about learning not to impress your own lifestyle onto others. To illustrate all this, I gave her this beautiful, long, flowing hair, which has the bonus of echoing real-life wisteria plants. To make her feel a little more concerned with personal grooming than the other ponies, I gave her these gold-painted hooves. To bring the gold further up throughout the design, I gave her matching earrings. I think it makes her feel a little more decorated. To complement Wisteria, up next is Minty. Out of this lineup, I think Minty is the most recognizable and beloved character from past generations. She's mostly recognized as a clumsier pony, but someone who's still quick and a creative thinker. For this show, I've made Minty the daredevil archetype, always seeking excitement and new things. Unlike Wisteria, she likes to improvise and change plans on a whim. I think she gets the most bored with the monotony of life in Ponyville, and her work at the Dream Tree is the best way she knows how to shake that up. She could demonstrate to kids the importance of problem solving and thinking on her feet, but would also be able to have stories about slowing down and enjoying what you already have. I incorporated a lot of triangles into her design to make her feel sharper, faster, and a little more unstable. I kept her cutie mark consistent with previous iterations, but I imagine here it's kind of representing enjoying the sweetness of life. Toolaroola is our wild card. While Minty represents the practical, real-life side of creative thinking, Toolaroola represents its more artistic applications. She and Sparkleworks are on a very similar, dorky, bubbly wavelength, but Toolaroola channels it into crafts. She knows everything about every pony in Ponyville, and helps Wisteria personalize the Dream Tree and its endeavors for their clients. Despite all her artistic talents, Toolaroola hasn't actually gotten her cutie mark, and I don't know if she ever would. While Crystal Lake is a story about finding yourself, I wonder if Toolaroola could be a story about how you don't need a single true life's purpose. How sometimes you just do what you enjoy, and it fulfills you, and that's enough. It doesn't have to be cosmically designed. I also imagine that Toolaroola could inspire creativity in the audience. There could be instances in which you would follow along with her crafting, kind of like the shepherd's pie from Scott Pilgrim. Toola was the hardest design to balance. Putting all the cool color on the tail makes her design feel bottom-heavy. To remedy this, I added the paint splotches to guide your eye around the design, and used the hairbands to incorporate colors from the mane into the tail, and vice versa. Finally, we have Butterdrop. This whole characterization is actually kind of a joke for me. I owned Butterdrop's toy as a kid, but she was only ever made as a baby pony, so to make her the big mama hen of the group felt very funny, like she had grown up. Butterdrop is the beating heart of the Dream Tree. She's been the manager since Sparkleworks' parent retired, and her efforts are more focused on making sure that her staff all takes care of themselves and gets along, rather than assisting the clients. Her cutie mark is supposed to represent not just a love for baking, but for taking care of others. That responsibility and selflessness is a huge part of what I'd want her character to convey to kids. But like most caretaker characters, she'd also have stories about learning to take care of herself just as much. She can't help anyone if she's sick or tired from overworking herself. I think making her much bigger than the other ponies helps distinguish her as older and conveys her as a protector figure. To balance out her larger physique, I gave her these little teeny tiny wings. I think they both framed the design well and weirdly make her feel a little more upbeat. To round it all off, I gave her that iconic pink heart on her leg that Generation 3 was known for, as kind of an extra special Easter egg to her old doll, since it's one of the things I remember the most about it. That brings us to the end of our show tonight. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and if you stayed to the end, let me know who was your favorite. Also let me know if you'd be curious to see my take on Equestria Girls with these ladies. I do have some ideas. As always, be sure to subscribe and head over to my Ko-Fi so you can see your name up here in lights just like this. That's all for us here at the show that no one saw. Thank you, and good night.